Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guest, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Karmic Path with your hosts, Tina Irwin and Laura Van Tyne. Join us as we dive into the normal and the paranormal to break through the darkness and to help you realize how karma, spiritual law, and psychic ability all combine to open the doors of understanding. This is the place where we build the karmic connections between science, psychology, and spirituality. But can we change our karmic path? Can we help someone else's karma? Stay tuned and join us for an opportunity to look at life and spirituality from a down-to-earth, no-nonsense, practical perspective. The Karmic Path radio show with Laura and Tina, Better Karma for Better Living, starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Karmic Path. I'm Tina Irwin, and I'm here with my co-host, Laura Van Tyne, who's trying to get Facebook Live started. And we want to remind everyone that while our passion is karma, one of the things we talked about in this little mini introduction is, can you help someone else's karma? And I think that's what's going to happen today when we talk with our guest, Karen Dietz. And we're going to be bringing her on shortly, how you can help someone else's karma. And part of this show is understanding the very nature of what it means to be a foster child, and maybe how many of us can help in that incredible situation. And before we get started, we want to thank the Oil Lounge for being our sponsors. We're always really grateful to them. So make sure you check them out at theoillounge.com. So Laura?
All right. So I guess what started this was, by the way, Karen, I'm going to call her the nepotistic guest. Because I know
Why
her.
Why are you doing that?
Because I know her, and she's just an amazing person.
She's not your kid, right?
No.
Okay, so it's not really nepotism.
No, but anyway, she has an incredible path. And one of the things she does is she helps people craft their stories. And when we talk about karma and our soul path and our evolution, we all have a story to tell. And it's an origin story. And the sum of all the experiences, all of the things we've done that have shaped us, the good, the bad, the ugly, they are all a part of us. And it's not something that we should say, oh, I wish I wasn't, or oh, I wish I didn't. It's a learning experience. It's simply an experience. And if we can kind of take the emotion out of that and change that experience, we can make wiser choices.
I think one of the critical elements is our experiences aren't static. The circumstances that surround us are constantly changing. That's no truer statement was ever made than for a foster child who can have up to 20 different have been in 20 different foster homes by the time they are emancipated or released from the foster care system. See, I really did pay attention.
That is good. Yes.
I'm incorporating what I learned.
It's amazing. And, we're talking about this, but we're talking about service. And I kind of want to back up this a little bit. And that is, a number of years ago when California had one of its first huge wildfire, we were evacuated because our neighborhood was literally lit up. And in the process, we're in my family and I are holed up in this hotel. And my oldest daughter, Georgia, was about 7 years old. And we're watching the news, and on the news screen, they're talking about how animal shelters are in need of supplies for all of the homeless animals that this fire caused, or animals that are injured. And it really sparked something in her at the ripe old age of 7. And she said, Mom, for my birthday, I want to have a birthday party and have all my friends donate supplies to an animal shelter. And so she dutifully wrote down from what she's watching on the screen on TV. She's writing down all of the supplies that these animal shelters need. They need, towels, and they need bandages, and they need food, and they need cat litter, and on and on and on. She wrote this all down. And when she did that, it kind of shifted some things in our family. So I'm going to fast forward about 2 or 3 weeks. And even though the fires are over, we're in our house.
Wait just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Back up. You left out this. There's a there's a train. You can drive a train through the story here. You left this whole. So when she had the birthday party, what happened?
Well, I'm getting there.
Yeah, but
we send out the birthday party invitations.
Okay.
And we decided that, well, since this is going to be a birthday party about the animal organization, let's make it animal themed and held it at a park and invite everybody you want. And what this did was it allowed those kids who couldn't necessarily come to birthday parties because the school they went to, there's a wide variety of socioeconomic statuses. And some kids don't go to birthday parties because they can't afford to bring a gift for the birthday kid. And it enabled those kids to come in and go to the party too. Not that if you don't have a present, you can't come, but they feel awkward. Right. It's an awkward feeling. So, old towels, old this and that. And so this birthday party that we had was an amazing success. And, I had this Toyota Sienna minivan and it was filled to the rim with supplies for the animals. And all these kids were so excited at the age of 7 that they got to contribute to some worthwhile cause. Because when we're kids, everything seems to be out of our control, right? We don't really have control over certain things in our life. But for that day, all these kids got together and they were part of this collective group to help animals in need. And
yes, I didn't want you to leave that part.
Oh, no.
That was such a great part.
I'm sorry.
You made me nervous. I didn't want you to leave that out.
And you know what? The only reason why I know this is because I'm really good at skipping details.
Yes. And I'm the detail person.
Yeah, she's a detail queen. Excel spreadsheet queen. So anyways, so she has this birthday party. It's a great success. And then the next step is we delivered the supplies to the shelter, which was fantastic. But what it also did was now her friends are starting to want to do their birthday parties like this, finding a donation or charity of some sort. And our other 2 girls, I brought it up. Wouldn't it be great if you girls did this too? Because we have 3 girls and similar birthdays. Yeah. And, our middle daughter is very much, she wears her heart on her sleeve and then sometimes out on a fishing pole. And just like very kind kid. And we look at the Polinsky Children's Center, and this is where she wanted to do her donation. And while I'm working with the Polinsky Children's Center, what I learned just literally broke my heart. And that is when a kid is in foster care, they move around a lot, which is to be expected for a variety of reasons. But when they have to move homes, they are given the giant, large lawn and leaf trash bag to put their belongings in. Think about that. You're 6 years old. You have no foundation. You have been thrown about the system in every way imaginable. And now you have to move into a different foster home now. And somebody hands you a trash bag to put your stuff in. What does that tell your subconscious?
Basically, what it tells the child's subconscious is, the obvious metaphor is that what you have is trash. There's
right, or you're
else.
Trash, yes.
And I don't think that when someone decided that's what they were going to give these kids, that was their thought. But it's caused the kids to actually potentially feel that. And self-esteem, it is built from the time a child is small.
Right.
And what you believe to be true about yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you are loved, how you know love, and what you learn about love. You learn all of those things by the age of 7. And when you have no foundation, no roots, it creates a challenge inside of a person. And that can happen whether or not you're a foster child, but it's especially poignant for a child that doesn't have someone who's always there for them, someone who loves them unconditionally, someone they can throw up all over and they still love them anyway.
Yeah.
And when you don't have those things, when you don't have that foundation, it creates some serious emotional challenges, not to mention the traumas. They have their own form of post-traumatic stress disorder simply from growing up. And I think maybe what we should do now is go to break so we can start with Karen.
All right, that sounds like a good plan.
We're a little bit early. I'm just throwing you a curve here because I'm so excited.
She's 2 curves in the first segment.
So did I miss anything?
Well, give me a second here, but when it comes to these types of things, their experiences and what happens with them and what we do with them can make all the difference in the world. And we are so excited to have Karen on here because we're going to be talking about her work with the Just in Time Foster Youth Program. And with that, we'll be back. You're listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. And please check out theoillounge.com. They were super helpful to me this week, by the way. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Karmic Path. I am sitting here next to Karen Dietz, who is author of The Business Storytelling for Dummies, which is a fantastic book. Check it out, by the way. Everybody needs an origin story. And when we learn how to craft our origin story, we get to know who we are a little bit better. And while we're here with Karen, so Karen and I one night were having dinner with our spouses, and we were talking about the foster youth program she was talking about. And I'm like, oh my God, did you know about the black trash bag thing? And Karen's like, why, yes, I do. And so that's, I thought you got to be on this show because she's going to tell us a story about this in a minute. But if you want to find out more about Karen, you can go to KarenDietz.com. That's diet with a Z. You get that a lot?
Right.
Okay. KarenDietz.com. And she is the author of The Business Storytelling for Dummies. And it's a fantastic book. And it really helps us to, honestly, it's a little unnerving sometimes. It's like, okay, gosh, what about this about me? Or what about that? And it really makes you think about yourself in a whole new light. It's a fantastic book. All right. So she has been helping former foster youth, craft their origin story to find their voice. And one of these stories in particular has helped Just in Time for Foster Youth. And it's Just in Time for Foster Youth. It's not a .com, but it is a .com. So. Okay. JustinTimeFosterYouth.com to raise funds to equip every foster kid with their own special bag to put their belongings in. And this former foster youth is on a mission to get our foster youth out of trash bags.
Right. Except I'm not a former foster youth.
No, you're not. No, you're the person you helped tell the craft story to. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it's amazing karma in action. It's just absolutely astounding. So a little bit, Karen. So when did you come to realize people had the need to craft their story?
I think it happened for me personally when I was in a job interview and somebody said, tell me about yourself. And I'm kind of going, where do I start? I mean, when I was, 5 years old,
right,
or when I'm in college. I mean, I've had a lifetime of experiences. How do I get my head wrapped around that?
Right. And I think everybody has that first job interview story. And if you can go into that first job interview with a story about yourself, one that is memorable, it really ups your odds of, I think, getting hired.
That's right. And then the other time that it happened was when I was on a date. And my date says to me, tell me about yourself. And I go, well, I was born in...
Right. And I think we've all been in that place, right? Yeah. Where it's like, oh gosh, what do I say? What do I say? But if you can kind of craft that story and it gives you a platform, right?
It does.
How does that help us?
Well, first of all, it's a way to figure out how to share your journey of your life in a way that is pretty focused, but also allows people to really understand who you are at a fundamental level, but in a way that makes everybody feel great about you. So what we do when we're working on our origin story is we look at the whole journey, and then we determine, well, what's the theme of that? And what does all that mean to me, like today? And once we understand that, then it's really easy to go back and pick out the experiences that allow us to get to that final thought and share that with people. And all of a sudden, our whole life starts making sense.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll go, God, I never knew that about myself. Or it's like, I've done it for myself.
And you've done it for yourself, but you've also done it for some pretty big companies like Disney and TEDx. So I'm looking at your resume because we're creating notes for the show. And I'm looking at Disney and I'm looking at TEDx and foster youth. Okay. That's a big gamut to be able to help, a CEO of a big company to, a kid who barely got out of high school, maybe in and out of jail, maybe has all these horrific traumas. That's a big gamut to help people, a variety of people balance who they are and to create that story.
Well, yes. And I'll tell you a common experience I have, no matter whether it's an executive or a former foster youth who's maybe, age 18 to 24, 25, is that once they get a handle on their story, it becomes so meaningful to them that they get actually emotional about it. And in a good way, right? In a way that their own story touches their own heart. And I tell you, when you can craft a story and tell a story in that way, not only do you feel like so enlivened about who you are, but other people will too.
It is a moment of engagement, right? So
Yes.
if you can, storytellers, Hollywood and all, they're great storytellers. It gives us a way to relate to people.
Yes. And what I loved about when you mentioned the trash bag story.
Mhm.
So I was helping one of the former foster youth at Just in Time. They were getting ready to do a fundraiser, and she calls me up the last minute. She goes, the executive director wants me to tell my story about, just trash bags, and how every time through my entire experience, which was most of her life in the foster care system, every time I moved to another home, which is like probably 10 plus times,
Right.
all of my belongings were put into a black trash bag, and that's what I had. And so we worked on her story, and I love the last line that she came up with, right? It was, and I am not trash.
Wow.
That's what the final message was that she was going to deliver to everybody in that audience. I am not trash.
And this is a kid who grew up in the foster system, who has a minimal education based on her experiences. Being scuttled from different school to different school does not create a strong foundation.
Right.
And she is giving this speech to some mighty powerful people.
Yes.
That took a lot of courage.
It takes a lot of courage. But one thing that she's learned by being able to tell her story, because this is not the first time I'd worked with her, was once she gets her story down, right, her confidence soars. And that happens across the board. Every foster youth I've ever worked with, their confidence just soars.
Well, I guess what you're doing is, and this goes with that for everybody, but especially with foster youth, they now have ownership of something that no one can take away from them.
Yes, and it's not a pity party story.
Right. And it's also a how do I relate to the world story?
Yes, and this is where I came from. This is where I am today. And aren't I proud about that?
That's huge.
That is huge.
Because when you grow up and you're disposable, right?
Yes.
And as a former teacher, I've had foster kids, and I've had kids who may have been better off being foster kids. They feel disposable. I'll never forget these two girls that I had. They, came to me, and neither parent wanted them. The parents were teenagers when they had them. They were never given up for adoption because they could just do it or whatever. Neither parent wanted these girls. The grandparents didn't want these girls, and nobody could afford these girls. So these girls are left with, I have nothing to lose. And from a societal point of view, when you have society members with nothing to lose, that's dangerous.
Right.
They had no ownership of anything. They had no control over anything. So as you're helping these foster youth craft their story, and this is for Just-in-Time Foster Youth, which is an amazing program, and you and Tina will be talking a little bit more about that in the next segment. Just amazing. It fills a need, but when you're giving them that ownership, they get their self-esteem back. Do you find also that they start to heal within inside themselves a little bit?
Just the fact of working on their story is a healing experience. I never really talk about that. It's just my observation of doing this since about 2012. And there's such a blessing in that. Such a blessing. I never address it with them directly, right? It's sort of an outcome that is a very special place to find yourself in. So I don't want to destroy that moment, right?
No, you can. Oh, do you feel healed? No, you don't. You don't do that.
Right.
I get that. But as you're watching them literally just blossom and grow, I mean, it has to be such an incredible feeling. And I remember that when my daughter graduated from UCSB about a year ago, one of the speakers of valedictorian was actually a foster youth. Oh. And she gave the most stunning speech. She basically said that she never had anyone she could rely on until she came to the university, and she had some professors who took her in and made her understand what she's worth. And I think that there's so many of us that grow up with all kinds of traumas and dramas, and it shatters us. And how do we grow from that? And I think one of the ways to do that is simply by thinking about and being introspective of our origin story. We all have one. We all have ups and downs and twists and turns, no matter what we do. And your book, The Business...
Business Storytelling for Dummies.
Thank you. Business Storytelling for Dummies is not just for business people.
Right. It's true.
It's not. It's not just for business people, but everybody has a business. If your business is a cashier in a grocery store, it's your business. If your business is running a multi-million-dollar company, that's your business. Mm-hmm. So everybody has a business, and how we craft our story also helps us handle the politics of that situation.
Right. It's all about who are you and what do you do? How do you share that in a way that's engaging and interesting, that builds connection and relationships? And stories, your stories, are actually the most powerful personal development tool you have available to you. You can learn so much from your stories if you have to take the time to dig into them. Right.
And that's it, right? And that can be scary.
It can be scary. It's scary for these former foster youth. They're afraid about telling their stories, first of all, because how do I talk about all the things and all the trauma, right?
Right. And do I really want to share that I was sexually abused, or do I want to share this or that? And how do I get out of that conversation if it comes up?
Right. And if I share my story, all I'm going to get back are stereotypes. Right. So I'm going to be labeled once again, I'm a foster youth. And so that doesn't feel good. And then what happens if I tell my story and then people ask me some really intrusive questions?
Right.
Because they're curious, right? Well, what kind of abuse did you have? Right. What was that sexual abuse like?
Right. They're well-meaning, but they're not necessarily well-thinking.
Yeah. And so there's lots of resistance to sharing their stories. But if you do it in a way where people end up feeling really proud of where they are today, what they've come through and what they've been able to achieve, then it's magic. And I've even had former foster youth who have helped with their stories actually go on and become advocates for changes in the foster care system.
Even within the government system. I mean, it's a huge deal. And
it is. So they'll testify in front of Congress at the national level.
Right. Can you imagine? That just blows me away. So by your ability to help them craft their story,
yes,
they're able to start, they can testify in front of Congress. I mean, that's how powerful knowing your origin story is.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a break in a moment. And when we come back, Tina's going to come in and you guys are going to talk about a couple of things. One is the Just in Time for Foster Youth, kind of what they do, but also 7 signature stories that you can do to find your voice and to claim your personal power. So you are listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. We will be right back.
Erwin, and you're listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. Today, I'm here with the second half with Karen Dietz, our special guest, and she's talking about creating your signature story for telling your story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Karen, I'm going to kind of turn this over to you and talk to us about Just in Time and what does this do for foster youth? And we're going to also be reiterating if someone wants to get involved. And before you start, I want to point out to people that when you're actually sitting next to Karen, she has this light in her eyes and it's this sparkle. And I have found that when people are doing service for others, there's something inside of them ignites with this light. And Karen has that. And maybe you can share with others how they can find that light.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I've been volunteering at Just in Time for Foster Youth. It's here in San Diego. It's a nonprofit organization since 2012 to help the former foster youth and their staff find and tell their most compelling stories. It's a way to, find their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we can find our voice and tell our stories, it's very, very powerful. And we have much more impact and influence in the world. So do you want me to talk about 7 signature stories?
No, but I think it would be really great if you could tell people about what Just in Time does, because it's only been in existence 7 years. So let's start with sharing with people some numbers. When you started, how many people were you helping and how many people are you helping now?
Well, Just in Time started, I think it was maybe in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. I started volunteering with them in 2012. And their whole mission is former foster youth emancipate from the system at age 18, and then that's it. Right.
What happens next?
What happens next? They often end up homeless, couch surfing on the streets because they don't have a place to stay. How do they get a job, right? How do they get a car? And
how do they get into college?
They get into college? No one tells them that. They don't have parents, right?
They have no fail-safe system.
Right. And so Just in Time was founded by 3 amazing women who decided that they needed to step in and provide services just in time for these young people when they emancipated from the system so that they could get a leg up. Right. So they would find them housing. They would furnish the apartment.
Okay. So let's say that somebody wanted to donate to Just in Time.
Yes.
And what kinds of things do they need? Let's say that someone is 18, they're emancipated, they've been given their trash bag. What do they need at that moment?
Right.
At that moment in time.
A suitcase would be helpful.
Exactly.
But that's
a new suitcase.
Right. What they need is they need help with housing. They need help finding a job. They need help with basic skills like financial fitness, How do you open up a bank account? How do you start creating a budget? How do you start saving money?
How do you manage a credit card? What is
Right.
credit debt?
How do you find a job? How do you write a resume? And so Just in Time has programs for all of these. In addition, they take donations of household goods so that when a former foster youth does have an apartment, a brand new apartment, they walk in, there's nothing there. Right?
Empty. What do you furnish it with?
Right. Not only a chair, they need forks and bowls and knives and spoons and a lamp, right? It's just, basic things. And so Just in Time has storage units where former foster youth, when they're in that situation, can come and do some shopping for the day. And that's all volunteer driven.
And then there's a truck that delivers it to their
apartment. Yes, volunteers have trucks. They would load up the trucks. We take up to their apartment. We help everything get unloaded and set up. And so we help people get set up for college. Right.
Okay. For what do you do for that?
Well, it's that program is called College Bound, I think. And it's a program where a day everybody comes together, volunteers and former foster youth. And by the end of the day, a couple things happen. First of all, every youth receives a computer.
That's amazing.
Right. And then they're paired up with a volunteer and we go shopping.
Okay.
Everybody has a budget and, okay, do you need a desk lamp? Do you need notebooks? Do you need pens and paper?
Towels for the bathroom?
Yes. And
linens.
Linens, right? What do you need in your college dorm to be a successful student and to, live in the dorm? So they go on that little shopping trip and get everything that they need, and then they're set up. And then there are volunteers that, and I've done this to help when they get into college. Well, how do you study? Right? How do you organize your schedule? What do you need to know about?
How do you face your fear? Your first day of college, when you've got all the things coming at you, and a kid with a family would call their mom or dad and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed." What does a foster youth do?
Well, if they have a volunteer, they're lucky, right? Somebody who they can call or talk to, and that volunteer can help them. Sometimes a college will have a special program for foster youth, but it's hard. That's
the bottom line. It's hard.
It's hard, right? And my experience is that there's never enough help there when they need it. Right? And so the more we can help this population, then the better off everybody is.
Well, let's say that this Just in Time wasn't there, and they actually are in college and maybe they're working several jobs.
Oh, yes.
And they have to get to their job and they have to get to class and they have a flat tire. So how does Just in Time help them with that?
Well, they can call Just in Time and they can share with them what happened. Right? I have a flat tire. I need to get to work. So Just in Time will say, okay, let's get that tire fixed. I'm going to cut you a check right now. We're going to get it to you. We'll help you get the tire fixed if you need it. And there you go. Because whether it's a tire, whether it's a muffler that falls off the car, these are the consequences. If you miss one day of work, right?
You might lose your job.
It's likely you will lose your job. And then that's what?
You can't pay rent.
You can't buy your groceries. And so where do they end up?
They're homeless.
And then once you're in that situation, it's really hard to get out of being homeless. So Just in Time steps in just in time when these youth need help.
Because a lot of times these kids have, again, no fail-safe system.
Right.
And they're one paycheck away from being homeless.
That's right.
And if you've ever watched TV and gone, oh my gosh, what should we do about the homeless? What if we were to prevent people where we can from becoming homeless in the first place? Because let's face it, if you're a young person, you'd like to have the power of being independent and building your life, but we all need help from each other.
That's right. And what I've learned is that from working over the years with these former foster youth and their stories is that everybody has a different story. And there are a lot of stereotypes that people who aren't in the, connected to the foster care system, we have a lot of stereotypes about these young people, most of which are not true. I work with they are the most resilient population I have ever come across. When they're in school, sometimes they're working a job or two. If they're not in school, they have a job or two, and they're raising their young siblings.
Or their children.
And so these are enormous, they're not obstacles, but they're
the day-to-day challenge.
Yeah, the day-to-day challenges that they have. And at such a young age.
I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yes.
We're going to skip our break because you're on a roll and I don't want to stop that. So we're going to keep going.
Right. So what I really value about working with these former foster youth is every story is different. I feel so blessed to be able to help them find their voice and tell their story in a way that makes them feel so great about themselves and make whoever is listening to them so great.
Because what you're teaching them is how do you garner respect, not pity.
Oh yeah, no pity.
No pity. You want respect from the person sitting across from you.
Yes.
So that that person can see you sitting tall and straight and independent and courageous.
Absolutely. Courageous is a great word to use here. And so if I can help them find that place in even just a little way, I feel totally blessed.
Okay. So this is a show about karma.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about the karma of what has happened when you have helped certain foster teens and young adults. What has happened to them into the future? How has that either come back to you or come back to the foster children community?
Well, I can only share with you some observations.
Okay.
And some of my observations, as I mentioned, the one, which is that some of these former foster youth, they turn into advocates, right, for change within the system. Many others say, oh, I want to give back. This is so interesting. I want to give back to Just in Time because they helped me. I want them to be able to help others. And so let me tell my story so that we can raise more funds.
Okay, so tell the story of the two events you told me before we actually started the show.
Right.
This was so fascinating.
so
heartwarming.
We
had a lot of bad stuff, but this was a good thing.
One of the first young people I worked with at Just in Time, it was for a big gala event, the annual fundraising event that many nonprofits have. And so here we were at the gala event, and I have been working with Sarah for, weeks.
She's a
former foster youth and telling her story. So we're at the event, and it's at this big mansion on the tennis courts. Hundreds of people. That tells you how big the tennis courts are, right? And everybody's having a great time. There was an MC there, was there for the evening orchestrating the event. And everybody was partying and totally ignoring him. Right? And then it comes time for Sarah to tell her story. And she got up on stage and she started to speak. And what happened is that soon, it was just like a minute or two, everybody stopped talking. All of their attention was riveted on Sarah. You could have heard a pin drop in that audience.
And you had been working with her.
Yes, and I've been working with her to tell her story in that situation, up on stage.
She had rehearsed.
She put a lot of work into it.
And you had given her the confidence of preparation.
Well, yes, absolutely. And the confidence in how to talk about her experiences in a way that made her feel really good.
Great.
And so bottom line is she was done after 10 minutes. And they immediately did a raffle or auction, right, after her story, and they raised immediately $75,000.
Wow.
One story, $75,000. So fast forward to this last year. So I was in 2012. So this last year in 2019, it was just in March. I helped 2 former foster youth stand and deliver their stories at the gala event in front of several hundred people, like I think maybe 500 people, 400 or 500 people. They did so great. And by the end of the evening, that organization, Just in Time, they had actually netted $800,000.
So almost $1 million came in.
Yes. And the year before, in 2018, they raised $550,000. So that's the jump, right? And so every year that they tell their stories, donations grow significantly. So that's one observation, right, that I have, the power of their stories. But I think for the former foster youth, what I observe again and again and again is they just feel grateful now about their own experiences. So I think the thread that runs through here are 2 things: service and gratitude. So these former foster youth turn into wanting to be of service. And because there's an expression of gratitude, there's a feeling of gratitude.
Because their success is hard won.
Yes.
And it it takes that feeling that community can be there. It's not always government.
Right.
Sometimes it's the individual who's really there for that person in that moment, shopping for your first college dorm or helping them move into a place or crafting their story or helping them. It's all those little moments that build on tomorrow.
Yes. And my personal experience of working with this population is a total expression of gratitude. I feel so grateful that I can use my talents to help other people in this way, that they can then experience levels of gratitude about their own story.
Because it's very nice to not always be on the receiving end.
Yes.
There's a feeling of power
yes.
in being able to give back. That is amazing.
It is. And so service, you get to these feelings of gratitude by being of service. Service and gratitude, these are gateways to happiness.
That's a great phrase, the gateway to happiness.
It is. And I think it's so true. And as an outcome of that, we build tons and tons of positive karma.
And you have contributing citizens.
Yes. Oh, that's
you have
so
people
good.
Who are not on the street.
That's right.
But for the grace of God, they're looking at this thinking that could be me in that tent.
Yes.
And keeping someone off the street, enabling them to feel like they can contribute and they have power over their life.
Right.
They grew up never having power over their life.
Right.
And now, for the very first time, they do. And I would like to encourage anyone, maybe you're retired, maybe your kids are off in school and you're looking for something to do, or you're thinking, what can I do with this really good piece of furniture? Yeah, I mean, how do people contribute to you?
You go to Just in Time's website. So it's Just in Time for Foster Youth. Just Google them. You'll get right to their website, and they have a whole donation page and so many different ways that you can give. And I want to share something else. It's also along this lines of service and gratitude, is that what these former foster youth tell me all the time, and through their stories, is that as they were going through these experiences, it was the teacher who said to them, you can make it. It was the teacher who said, I believe in you. It was the neighbor who didn't know really anything that was going on in these young people's lives, who cooked dinner and brought it over to them right at the time when they had no food in the house. Over and over again, it is these small acts of kindness that also changed lives, made a huge difference in these young people's lives. They'll say, I'll never forget that neighbor. I'll never forget that teacher. What they did to me kept me going. So there's awareness, and being aware and stepping in to serve in these small acts of kindness. That's one level. And then the other level is actually connecting with Just in Time and making a donation, becoming a volunteer, helping out in some way.
Okay. I think that the karma that's created, not that you're going to be a volunteer so you can earn positive karma.
Right.
The irony of what actually happens is, it's not like saying so many Hillary our fathers and, the
let's fill up the karma bank.
Let's do our system of indulgences to get into heaven. It's not that.
Right.
It's that there is a joy in giving and helping someone, and then helping them stand up to be better than they could ever have been.
Yeah, because I wonder if when you have the mentality of, let's fill the karma bank, whether that actually does anything.
I think it's, how can I help? And it's a genuine desire. I have this skill set.
Yes.
And with this skill set, I might be able to help this person with that skill set. Mm-hmm. And the element of service, there was a great master who walked the earth, died about 20 years ago. And he said, we are here for service.
Yes.
And as you're walking your spiritual path, as you're walking your karmic path, when you stop worrying about what's in it for you, and you embrace the joy of giving to another person, it something inside of you turns on and awakens to perhaps your own goodness. And then you see the goodness of others. And I'm hoping as people watch this particular episode, that they feel good about their community and ask themselves, there's a lot of need out there, but this one is particularly interesting and really helpful that other people could do that would begin to change things on so many levels. How can you tell your story? And how do these kids learn how to manage money? We have a lot of people who have no idea what a credit card is. Or when I was in the Navy, I had one young woman who thought that if you had checks in your checkbook, that meant you had money in your account.
And we assume that everybody knows these
things. And they don't know those things.
They don't know how to look for a job. They don't know how to write a resume. They don't know how to
fill out an application.
They don't know how to fill out an application. So these are fundamental skills that we take for granted that not everybody knows. And so we have to approach people with questioning, how can I help you? What do you know? What don't you know that I do know that I can help you with? And
everyone has certain skill sets that could be of benefit to someone else.
Absolutely.
And sometimes all someone needs is an ear to listen.
That's true.
Sometimes maybe you don't have what you think is a special skill set. You just can be an ear that someone could call and listen to.
I'm so glad you said that, Tina, because people, might have assumptions about how I work with these former foster youth. Oh, okay, here's the structure of a story. Here's how we start, blah, blah, blah. But, it's not about that. It truly is just listening.
Okay, well, we have very little time left, seconds.
Right.
What do you want to leave our listeners with as we end this super fast hour? And we're deeply grateful that you came and joined us today.
First, I want to reiterate that service and gratitude are the gateways to happiness. And who wouldn't want more of that?
Absolutely.
And then if you want to know more about the 7 signature stories that every person needs to be able to tell about themselves, you can go to my website at KarenDietz.com. You can sign up for my newsletter and you'll automatically get that worksheet.
Okay. All right. We want to thank everyone for listening today. And as always, we thank the Oil Lounge for being our trusted and very precious sponsor. I want to thank our producer, Kat Graby, for sticking with us through all of these things. Be sure to check out our books and courses on thekarmicpath.com. And stay tuned next week. It's going to be exceptionally interesting. We want to give a special thanks to you, Karen, for being with us today. You've been just amazing as we bang our headsets. And with that, we will sign off. We'll see you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you all.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Karmic Path Radio Show. Listen live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time as we explore the fascinating elements of karma and how to make those critical connections between spirituality, science, and psychology. Both of us are seasoned psychics living ordinary lives in public education and the military. Tina and I both have a deep-rooted dedication to learning how the unseen world works and to share this knowledge. Learn how to create a heightened sense of understanding and karmic awareness for greater personal balance with the Karmic Path. For more information, visit thekarmicpath.com.